Hi friends, welcome to my channel Soulful Spinning. This is my channel where I share my creative endeavors with fiber and yarn. I'm a hand spinner and a knitter coming to you right outside of the great city of Chicago in the Midwest of the US. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. This is the 10th of March 2023. So glad you checked me out. And if you're a returning viewer, thanks so much for continuing to come back and listen to me ramble on about my love of wool. So in today's episode, we have an update on our winter breed study. Sometime before Christmas, I had purchased a box of fibers from around the world from Hearthside Fibers, I think, on Etsy. And I've been spinning these up. I think I've got only 2 more after this one. This week's wool was Polwarth. And I have a beautiful spin of Polwarth and a square that I almost finished with. I got up super early today. I only finished spinning and plying yesterday, Thursday the 9th, and got it plied up, washed it, put it in a really hot place in my house so that it would dry, and luckily it dried. Last week I talked about Falkland wool, which isn't really a breed, it's just a location, a geographical location where a lot of sheep are bred, and the Falkland Islands is also home to Polwarth. Polwarth is quite a predominant breed, I found out, in the Falkland Islands. So Polwarth was one of these breeds. I kind of lump it in with Bond and Corriedale in that they were all developed sort of in the late 1800s. Polwarth was developed in Victoria, Australia during 1880, and the goal was to get 1/4 Lincoln and 3/4 Merino in the breed. Yeah, I have a couple of websites I'm going to share with you today where I got some information about Polwarth, which I think Polwarth is one of the best fine wools there is. It has the softness of Merino, but it has a nice staple length, I think, from those long wool genetics. And I found the spinning to be just lovely spin, and the yarn is just cuddly soft and really beautiful. So yeah, later on I'm going to do another episode on Bond and Corriedale, which were also developed, Corriedale in 1882 and Bond in 1909. But they were all Bond in Australia, Corriedale in New Zealand. So it's interesting that these sheep breeds are fairly modern in my view. So now I didn't have to go to the little mini, tiny little 25-gram sample of Polwarth because I happen to have a big bag of Polwarth comb top in my stash. I think I purchased a pound from some online vendor, and I got it for really inexpensive, like it was like 20 bucks or something for the whole pound. And so this is just a little piece of it here. I've used it in some blends on my drum carder. It blends beautifully with silk, Angora, alpaca. It's a beautifully white fiber. The Polwarths do come in colored varieties, which I have actually a sample of that here. You can just see how beautifully soft and just like a dream. I feel like it just has a little more character than Merino, though I love Merino, and Merinos come in a wide variety as well. Merino is not just one breed. You know, Merinos are grown in various places, and they have different variations. So they're not you know how they talk about monoculture. I don't really feel like Merinos are that way. There's lots of strains and breeds of Merino. Yeah, so this is my Polwarth. I took a little bit longer spinning this week's breed because I used my support spindles, or 2 of my support spindles, because I'm experimenting with spinning a little bit finer. I tend to spin basically sort of a heavy lace weight single that when I 2-ply it, I get a sport to DK weight. And I also like to spin on the thicker side too. I like to make worsted weight yarns. And I like to mix up my spinning because I think it's really easy to get into a trap of just spinning one weight, and then it's really hard to get out of that. I've heard many times people, their goal is to spin a 3-ply sock yarn really fine, and then once they get to that point, they struggle to get more of a thicker single again. So I'm the opposite. I'm trying to spin, I can spin thick, no problem, but spinning thin is always a challenge, hence the support spindles. These are the two spindles that I selected out of my little corral. I probably have about a dozen support spindles. This one was the first one I ever purchased. This is from Ian Tate over in on the Isle of Wight, and it's ebony, and I don't remember what this is. It's beautiful though. It's a little bit. I picked two support spindles that are a little bit on the heavier side, figuring that I don't want to spin cobweb, and I think with a super fast spindle like this one here. So this one is a Spanish peacock spindle, it's bead whirl, and this one has such a wicked fast spin that it's really ideally suited for spinning thread or real fine singles. So yes, I chose these two. I spun so much, and I forgot to take breaks, that yesterday morning I woke up and I had some pain in the joint of this finger, and I thought, oh, I'm getting my mother's arthritis, because my mother Felicia had terrible arthritis in her old age. You know, her hands were quite arthritic. And I was having a lot of pain in this knuckle, and I was thinking, what have I been doing, you know, that would make my knuckle hurt? Well, you know, when you do this for hours a day, that was it. So if you've been following me for a while, you know that I've been working on my ambidextrous spinning. So I naturally hold my fiber in my right hand. I just learned that way. But and then I flick with this hand. But I think if you've been following me, you know the story. But evidently, when you push like this, it takes more effort, and it's not as ergonomic as when you hold the spindle in your right hand and you do more of a snapping motion. Yeah, and indeed, anytime I see expert spinners on support spindles, they always are flicking with their right hand and drafting with their left. So I've been working on that, but even so, even with the right hand method, that continuous motion was, you know, giving me some pain. I mean, I do have some arthritis because I'm 62 years old. So, but I guess the moral of that story is there's sometimes too much of a good thing, and you do need to rest your hands and maybe do a variety of activities. The other thing I was working on is a sock, and I was so intent on getting the heel and the turn done that I didn't take a break. So yeah, you know, your hands are the most important tools that you're ever going to have when it comes to crafting and making. These are it, right? You can have all the fancy tools in the world, but these are very important. So don't do like I do. Make sure that you are resting your hands. So I spun up about 30 grams, give or take, on these 2 spindles. Oh, and the other one, this one is an Enid Ashcroft spindle, which is also a very beautiful spinner, and about the same weight as this one. So kind of the British makers I'm showcasing this week here. Right, so here is my finished yarn. I balled it up yesterday, and I worked like mad this morning trying to get this square knitted up. I just knitted this today. It is a beautiful wool. I think that Polwarth, it just really, it really combines softness with strength. And you can see this is a fingering weight yarn that I made. It has a very delicate feel to it. I think this would be lovely for a little baby. You know, those little baby hats, those little caps they make for little infants and things that are next to skin, because it's super, super soft and lovely. So I treated myself to a new pair of new set of double pointed needles for my projects here. I'm using a 3.5 millimeter needle for all my squares. This square is from the Berlin Blanket by Kate Davis. Though I am experimenting with some other stitch patterns. If you watched me last week, I did a different pattern there. But I treated myself to a set of Lantern Moon ebony knitting needles. And I prefer a longer length on my DPNs. I think this is an 8-inch length because of the size of my hands. If they're too short, they tend to poke when I knit. So yeah, I picked these up from a shop on Etsy, Camelot Fibers, I think. I'll post the link. But they're just, they really made the knitting much more pleasurable. These needles are just so smooth. And they're slick enough that the stitches slide easily, but it has that warmth of wood, which I really appreciate. And yeah, I was watching one of the Jane Eyre movies on Amazon Prime this morning while I was finishing this. So yes, while poor Jane was finding out that Mr. Rochester has a wife in the attic, I was just about to bind off, but I figured I better get on the camera before the day gets away from me and I don't get a chance to speak with you today. So yeah, so happy about the spin. I have been feeling lately that this breed study's been sort of a part-time job because I committed myself to these 13 breeds, a baker's dozen. And as I get to the end here, I'm getting that, you know, when you're at the end of a project and you just got to push to the end. I feel that way with this little series I'm doing. But thanks to you lovely people out there encouraging me and telling me to continue and that you're enjoying the study, I am continuing on. So yeah, so what can I tell you about Polwarth? I already mentioned that Polwarth is the aim for 3/4 merino and 1/4 Lincoln, which is a British long wool. And I think they originally called them Dennis comeback sheep. I'm not exactly sure what that comeback term means, but I think it sounds really cute. I think it means that they take 2 breeds, like a long wool and a fine wool, and they do lots of crossbreeding and breeding and breeding. And then eventually it returns to its fine wool characteristics. I think they call that a comeback sheep, which I thought was really cute, like the comeback kid. So from the Breeds of Livestock website from Oklahoma University, we learned that the Polwarth is dual purpose, developed in Victoria in 1880, 75% merino, 25% Lincoln. Well suited to areas with improved pastures and are primarily found in the higher rainfall districts of southern Australia. They have been transplanted to South America, where they're known as ideals down there. And then, of course, the Falkland Islands, they're a pretty prevalent breed there. The Polwarth breed contains both polled and horned sheep, with the polled types predominating. If you do an image search of Polwarth, most of them do not have horns. A large-framed, robust, produces a high-yielding, soft-handling fleece of 22 to 25 microns. Much of the emphasis within the breed has been directed toward developing and improving the wool aspects. The Polwarth yields a uniformly lean and carcass suitable for a number of export markets. So yeah, so for lamb as well. So that's from the Handbook of Australian Livestock is the reference there that they use. As I was spinning this Polwarth, I was remembering some years ago, it was actually 2015, when I first started getting into breed-specific wool and buying fleeces. I kind of went a little crazy and started buying a lot of fleeces. And I actually ordered some colored Polwarth from Stuart and Susan Albury in New Zealand. And I actually had to dig it out in my stash. So, yeah, as many of you know, I do have a pretty healthy stash. At last count, now this is not how many fleeces I have, but I think I have like 13 different breeds in my stash, which just didn't seem like that much, but I have multiple fleeces from the same breed. Like, for example, for Romney, I think I have 3 or 4 Romneys. So, an Icelandic, I have like a half a dozen Icelandic, so it's not, it's deceiving, But what I was saying is that I thought I had bought some Polwarth, and I was really new and inexperienced when it came to fleece washing and preparation, and I think I just didn't have a lot of success with it because it was so fine, and I didn't really feel competent to process it. So I did the Judith McKenzie technique of stuffing the fleece. It was dirty into a 5-gallon bucket, and it's just been stored away well since 2015. Well, I dug it out a couple days ago, and I have the wool here to show you. I feel like calling this episode in praise of stash because I'm going through my stash and I'm finding all these really lovely wools that I have curated over the years, and I'm really going to focus on processing these, as the weather gets warmer and so on. But anyway, this is the wool that I purchased. So you can't really tell a difference. This is actually dirty. It was very clean. It's real. It's very dry handling now and very sticky. Probably from the lanolin that's been sitting on it for years. And then this is it washed. I think this was a lamb's fleece, and oh my goodness, the locks are so, I think this is one of the things that kind of intimidated me. The locks are very, very skinny. I like that. Very extremely soft and silky and strong. I think it's got like lammy tips here. It's very, very silky feeling. So yes, this is the clean. Oops, that's a little piece of something else. Okay, so this is the clean, and what I'm doing is I'm using my mini combs. I'm pulling out the locks here. Look at the tiny little lock, and I'm going to comb this because carding this would be a disaster, I think. Would develop all kinds of neps because it's so fine. I would say it's in the low 20s micron. So I used extremely hot water. I boiled some extra water in my tea kettle, and I did 2 hot scours. I did do a Dawn scour, which is a washing up liquid we have here, and then I also used Power Scour just to see, if it would come clean, and it actually did come clean. So yeah, so here's the raw. It's got a nice crimp structure. It's got a decent staple length. But yeah, this is real, real sticky. but it doesn't really feel dirty, just sticky from the lanolin. So yeah, it doesn't look that much different washed and scoured. So here's my Polwarth. I mean, it's so nice to think, oh, I might have some Polwarth in my stash. Let's go dig it out. So, you know, it's kind of neat. I don't have to order anything because I have this wool. So this is what it looks like. Oh, so pretty. Look at the color. It's this beautiful moret, soft brown color, and it's so pretty. It's really, really fine. I think you can even see it in the camera how fine it is and how soft it is. I think you could do, I'm actually spinning this really thin. I think this would be an amazing lace. I think it'd be a beautiful lace lace shawl. It's really extremely soft. Yeah, so I washed a very small quantity because it has been sitting around actually for some years, and I gave it a cold soak overnight, and I really put a small amount of fleece in a large amount of water, figuring that it really needed to get saturated with the cold. And then I did the same thing when I scoured. And what I did to keep it sort of contained is I used a mesh bag, but I didn't put the fiber in the bag. I actually just used the mesh bag sort of as an inner lining of the container, and then that sort of kept the wool together because it's so fine when it was wet. It could very easily get away from you. So yeah, so there's my Polwarth. I did find the packing label, and it's hard to decipher it, but I saw that it was Stuart Albury from somewhere in New Zealand that I can't pronounce. It's from Waimate, Waimate, which I could totally have looked the pronunciation up, but I didn't. So yeah, they specialize in, Stuart Albury and his wife Susan, they specialize in colored sheep, and I will post a picture from this article here. Specifically, it said that the Polwarth sheep were bred by Richard Dennis in southwest Victoria, and they were first known as Dennis comebacks, and they've been successfully exported to other countries. So I'm sure you've had, if you're a spinner, or even a knitter, you probably have had experience with Polwarth. It's a pretty easy to access wool. You know, you can, a lot of hand dyers and excuse me, hand dyers will use Polwarth, and Polwarth silk in particular, you see a lot, is very popular, hand dyed for spinning. So I would love to hear your experience of Polwarth, whether knitting or spinning. How do you like it? If you're a newer spinner, I think it's a really good first fine wool. I wouldn't recommend it for a brand new spinner, but really, if you want to spin something that's going to make your heart sing, and if you want to go for a fine wool, go for it. But no rules in spinning. So yeah, so that's my Polwarth spin. Oh, I did the grist measurement, so you're probably interested in the grist. All right, so I got 97 yards in 25 grams, which is equivalent to 1,763 yards per pound. It'd be the equivalent of 355 meters in 100 grams, or 440 yards in 4 ounces. So a true fingering weight, I would say, which probably is the thinnest I have ever spun. I took the fleece to spin it, the wool. What I would do is pull off a staple. And this is the staple length. It's probably about 4 inches. And then I would fold it over my hand. This is what I did for the majority of the spin. And just spin right from the tip of that. And then I was watching, I think there's a channel called The Sip and Spin. I think she's another Illinois woman. Illinois. I always say Illinois, which is wrong. It's Illinois, but she showed how to make these little kind of faux Rolags with the wool. And she used I used a, let's see, spin here a little bit. Get my thoughts together. See how fine it wants to spin. So fine wool wants to spin fine. So I did this for quite a while, just spinning this from the tip like so. And then I did experiment with making some little faux Rolags, but I found that the wool got a little compacted, even though I tried to be real loose when I did the roll. And I found that this is called spinning from the fold. Gave me the best, most consistent result. So yeah, very fine. Actually, I felt like I was getting into the lace weight territory here as I was spinning. Yeah, I would say like a heavy lace weight. So I have a fear of thin yarns. I don't know why. I don't know if I'm afraid they're going to break. I don't really enjoy knitting with really super fine yarns. But I want to change that. So yeah. So let me just take a little break here and replace the battery on my camera, and then we'll finish up. I have a couple of things to show you this week. I have my off from my bookshelf selection. I have a couple of acquisitions that I wanted to share with you, and yeah, and then give you a progress update on my sock. So speaking of thin yarns, I'm really interested in all the technical aspects of knitting and spinning, even though I'm not an extremely technical spinner. I'm really interested in historical, traditional ways of knitting in various parts of the world. And I picked up these two books, and this would be, I guess, the acquisition section. I picked up these two books from some online used bookstores. One of them is called, one of them is called Gossamer Webs. It's by Galina Kimleva. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, forgive me. And this is the history and techniques of Orenburg lace shawls knitting. And then this is a pattern. It's got 3 Orenburg shawls to knit. I was influenced by, I have a good friend who spins gossamer thread and knits these kinds of pieces, and she's trying to encourage me to spin a little bit thinner. So I just picked up these. These are very, very inexpensive books. This one has a lot of details about the spinning process. Some nice black and white pictures. It explains how they do the plying, which is really very interesting. And then it gets into all the different constructions of and then it has, it has directions on the instructions on how to make the shawl, as well as just little swatches of different patterns. Now, I'm not really a lace shawl wearer yet, but it's a beautiful book with a lot of historical information about the lace knitting heritage of the Orenburg region, and especially the Orenburg goats. So I have percolating in my mind, I would like to do a goat breed study, try to get as many different kinds of goat fiber as possible. And definitely will pick up some Orenburg goat to try. But yeah, they talk about the spinning process. Of course, I've only been spinning for about a dozen years. These women have been spinning for decades. But there was the cutest picture in here. Look at, it's a little girl. I think she's plying here. I think she's plying here. And then here she's knitting. So yeah, isn't that cute? So yeah, I'll never catch up to that. But yeah, so I picked these two books up from a used bookstore. And then I was looking on, I was Googling support spindles or supported spindles. And I came across this super deal on eBay of all places. And I actually picked up two spindles in the Orenburg tradition. They're not the plying spindles, they're the spinning spindles, so they use bigger ones for plying. And here they are. They're very simple design, extremely lightweight. This one really looks, both of them look very traditional. This one has a really beautiful burnt design. That's just a little tiny bit, a cashmere sample that I was practicing on. This is more like a Russian spindle in that it spins very fast, but not very long, I suppose, until you get more yarn here. And then it also came with this beautiful bowl, which I used for my spin of the Polwarth. I used this as the surface. So I'm all set for spinning thin. This one is faster spinning because it's got a bottom weight there. And this is a little, I think this is a little camel silk I was playing with on that one. You see how this one spins a lot faster and longer. Look at that, really beautiful. And I want to say, I think I got the two spindles, the bowl, and she also sent me some what looks like homemade knitting needles out of steel. I think they were a size 0, like they're about 2 millimeter or so. And the whole thing was just like $30 or $35 or something like that, which I thought was really a steal. So yeah, I definitely want to experiment with spinning finer, and I think that these are the tools for that job. Last week I talked about pulling out some hand spun from my stash, some CVM that I spun up a couple years ago, and I'm going to make the arboreal jumper by, I think her name's Jennifer Steingass. And I started swatching, I did the swatching in the round thing where you cast on a certain number of stitches on a circular needle and you knit across, and then you slide the work to the other side, and then you loosely pull the yarn on the back to mimic knitting in the round. And I started in on the color work swatch, and then I was watching podcaster, Wool in the Forest. I was watching Ducky, and she was talking about Elizabeth Zimmerman's swatch cap. So she said that Elizabeth Zimmerman would recommend, when you're swatching for color work, instead of just doing a random swatch, making a swatch cap. And so she actually is making a swatch cowl because she's working on a project. So I thought I would make a hat with the arboreal color work around the brim. And so I cast on, my gauge is spot on. I'm getting 20 stitches per 4 inches or 10 centimeters. And the pattern, the leaf pattern is like a 12 stitch pattern. So I figured how many stitches to cast on, and I'm just knitting the ribbing right now. I cast on 104 stitches, and then on a size 3.5 millimeter or US 4. And then once I'm finished with the brim, I'm going to switch to a 4 millimeter needle, which is a US 6, and do the color work with this gray, the gray CVM that I purchased. I didn't buy this, I spun this. yeah, so hopefully next week I'll have most of the colorwork swatch done, or maybe the whole hat done, and then I'll be ready to make the jumper. I figured it'd be nice to have a matching hat. So that's a hand-spun project in the works. All right, what else have I been working on? I've been working on my my sock. This is a sock I started last week. It's a Zauber ball crazy, and I think the name of the wool, it's called Hourglass, it translated. And I'm knitting these on these tiny little wooden needles here. These are just some, I think they're laminated birch, knitting it on 4 needles, using the 5th to knit. Really, really pretty. I had a little trouble right before the heel flap. I made a mistake and I had to take it off the needles, and I had a dickens of a time getting it back on because though the color of the yarn is beautiful and I'll definitely knit with it again, it was very difficult for me to pick up the stitches because it kept splitting. And I actually see a little ridge here where, but you know, they're on my feet, it won't matter. So there's my TV knitting. And hopefully I will have a finished sock next week, and maybe the other one started. So I was following a pattern, a free pattern on Ravelry, but I ran into trouble understanding. I haven't knit that many socks, so figuring out the heel flap and how you're supposed to slip the stitches and everything. Which brings me to my book selections from my bookshelf this week. And I have 2 of them in hand by the same author, and I have the third one, but I lent it out, so I don't have the third one. But these 2 books are by Ann Budd. This one is Getting Started Knitting Socks, but I tell you, if you only had one sock book to knit with for the rest of your life, this would be it. And then she's got this handy book of patterns. And then the third one is a top-down sweater book, but I lent that out, so I don't have that to show you today. But what Ann does is she takes all the math calculations and does them for you, essentially. In this book, Getting Started Knitting Socks, she walks you through the whole construction of knitting socks. I think she uses 3 double-pointed needles, gives you variations on how you can do the heel flap, and then breaks down by gauge, does a separate knitting pattern for every gauge that you would possibly have. So, and she gives you lots of tips on avoiding holes at the gusset, and she has the Kitchener stitch in there. She has a couple of patterns with some simple designs on the ribbing. She has a whole little stitch dictionary at the back that gives you different options for what you can put on your sock. And I find myself referring to this book quite a bit. So she's got a 5 stitches per inch, a 6 stitches per inch, a 7 stitches per inch, and so forth. She also gives you information about measuring your foot. Highly recommend this book if you've never knit socks. I know a lot of you expert knitters out there. You can knit socks in your sleep practically because you've been knitting them forever and you have your own pattern. But I really credit this book with helping me understand the magical construction of socks. And then of course this one helped me out this week in figuring out how many stitches I should cast on for my swatch cap. So these books, these 3 books by Ann Budd, I think are really invaluable for hand spinners because you can make your swatch and then you figure out the pattern that will meet your swatch rather than trying to get your yarn to meet a swatch of a pattern, if you get my meaning. So I'll give you an example here of what she has in here. So The only sweater she has in here is a pieced sweater, but like I said, she does have that other book that gives you. But here's the hat. Like, for example, I'll show you the chart here. I'm not giving too much away. So here, she's got the different heads, of course with a calculator, and you can do this on your own, but it just kind of takes the guesswork out of it. Let's say you want a 21-inch finished circumference, and then it, by gauge, all the way from 3 stitches per inch to 9 stitches per inch, will tell you how many stitches to cast on. Of course, if you have a calculator, I mean, it's the simple proportional reasoning, but it's nice to have this just for the numbers. So yeah, thank you, Ann Budd, for these books. I'll have to get that top-down book and show that to you on another episode. So that is from my bookshelf this week. So other things I've been working on this week is, I've been inventorying my fleece stash. I want to get everything washed up. I don't have too many raw fleeces left. I have some Romney that I washed this week. I also have some Corriedale that still needs to be scoured, not full fleeces, just partial fleeces. And I'm working on that. But I thought you might be interested in seeing a couple of I did a couple like mini fiber processing this week. And one of them is with a fleece that I bought. Again, it was years ago I purchased this fleece. I was at Greencastle Fiber Festival, which is a nice festival in Indiana. And I purchased this fleece here. This is a Polwarth. This is Polwarth wool. Things labeled here. I'll do another episode just on Polwarth as part of my ongoing breed studies. But look at the locks here. This is washed here. It's this beautiful taupe color. It's really beautiful. This is just a little bit of it. I have several pounds of this in my stash, and I just made a couple of nests. It's beautiful silvery taupe color. I have it labeled on here because I'm afraid I forget what it is. But yeah, So yeah, in praise of stash, because sometimes I get fleece envy. I'll watch somebody else on another channel, and they'll be pulling out fleeces and showing them off and stuff, and it's sort of like that. I want that, that coveting tendencies that I have, and so my remedy for that is going to be to just find something in my own stash and appreciate it for what it is, and actually deserves to be worked with. So yeah, so that's Polwarth, which is a long wool. I found that one. I also found some Clun Forest. I bought a Clun Forest fleece from somebody on Etsy some years ago. It was very inexpensive. And here's some of the washed. It wasn't a coated fleece. It's got some vegetative matter in there. And I picked some apart, and I made this 37-gram bat, Clun Forest. So I made a little hand-spun piece of wool and wrapped it up in that. So I will probably do an episode on Clun Forest, and this is plenty to spin up to make a swatch to add to my blanket. So yeah, so that's my Clun Forest that I had. It's really fun. And one other one I thought I would show you is this beauty here. This is pretty. So this is a Corriedale lamb's fleece that I have in my stash. I've spun up quite a bit of this. I couldn't find my hand spun. I have spun up quite a bit of this already, but there's the lock. I'm a sucker for brown fleeces and black fleeces. I just love them. Again, soft and strong. And I was having a go with it on my combs this week. So pretty. Wood and wool wooden wool. That would make a nice name for a channel, wouldn't it? So you can see I get distracted from what I, what I'm supposed to be working on, but yeah. Yeah, so that's it for this week, friends. I will sign off now. Wish you a good week, a good, safe week. I hope you're safe and warm wherever you are, and that you're finding some time to do some crafty things. I'm spinning this on my lap with no bowl at all. That's this one here. How can I keep from spinning? All right, well, I wish you well. I hope you have a good week. Please do let me know how you're doing in the comments below. If you have any questions about anything I talked about today, or you want to share your experience with Polwarth or any other breeds that you're working on, I'd love to hear from you. And as always, take care, and we'll see you again next weekend. Bye-bye for now.